What do you like most about coming back to Detroit?
I love everything about coming back to Detroit. I've been here so long. People at home, they say, that's your home up there. You've quit us down here. But this is like a second home to me, honest to God. When I get all nervous when I get ready to come back to Detroit. My wife loves it here. And 100 years of celebration. I've got to speak in Arkansas on Saturday. And when I told them I was coming up here last night for the celebration, they got all nervous. They said, they'll keep you there all week. You won't be back. I said, I'll be back. I'll be back Thursday night, I guarantee you.
So obviously you have great memories in Detroit. What are your favorite memories?
Oh, I have so many memories here. I came to Detroit from Philadelphia. I was traded here. Came to the major leagues from a Class B league, obviously over my head. And Mr. Mack traded me to Philadelphia, and I hit 300 that year, hit 300 for the next 8 years, but I had to work at it, Gibby. A lot of guys are natural hitters, I thought, but I found out talking to Stan Musial and Ted Williams, there's no such thing as a natural hitter with a baseball bat. It's the toughest thing in the world to do, you know that. You go out there with a round bat and a round ball and a guy throwing bullets at you. But I learned to go to right field in situations, pull the ball in situations. I was not fast, but I could bunt very well. I kept that third baseman right in on top of me so I could pull the ball by him. And I learned how to hit. And you know, you've got to learn.
Now, interesting enough, you have a Hall of Fame baseball career, and you end up being a broadcaster, telecaster on TV.
Right.
How did that happen, and what was your motivation for doing it after being a player?
Well, when I was 35 years old, I played my last year in Baltimore for Paul Richards, and Brooks Robinson came up that year, and then they sent him back, and Paul said, Brooks is not ready. He needs another year in the minors. I was wanting to quit. I wanted to go home and be with my family. I said, no, I'm quitting. I promised my son who's graduating from high school I'll be home all year with him. So Paul said, all right, if you're quitting, I've got a job for you. And so I worked 1 year there, only on Saturday and Sunday, and I was home. And Mr. Fetzer called me. I sat down with him in his office, and finally, he reached in his pocket and he whipped out a blank contract. And he said, George, sign this. It's for 5 years, and just give me 5 years. And sign it. Put a figure in there you want. And I thought, nobody ever did that for me before. I wrote a figure in there.
What'd you put in there?
I put in 25,000.
Oh, you dummy!
Yeah, dummy. Dummy. Well, I was making 15 at CBS. And
so you figured he'd blow you off at 25. You had no chance.
I can't pay that. And at the end of 5 years, I quit because I was gone from home so much. I said, Mr. Fetzer, I can't do it anymore. He said, you belong to me. And don't you go take another job. I'm going to figure this out. Harwell and I were doing radio and television. And if we're doing the same game, both on the same day, at the half inning, we'd split half game. He called me that winter. He said, George, I got it figured out and you'll love it. He said, you'll do the TV only. I'll put somebody in the booth with you. Harwell will do radio only, and I'll put somebody in the booth with him. I don't think that suited Harwell too much. He wanted to do TV, but boy, it pleased me. He said, we're going to do mostly weekend games. And you can fly in on Friday night, you can go home on Sunday night, and you can be with your beloved Swifton all week long.
George Kell, one of 13 Tiger Hall of Famers. Of course, his broadcast partner, Al Kaline, is in there as well, and Sparky Anderson joins that list coming up this July, and our friend Ernie Harwell in the broadcasting wing of the Hall of Fame as well. We had the great pleasure of hearing George broadcast a ball game a couple of weeks ago. He was back in Detroit and kind enough to do a couple of innings with us, and the fit was like your favorite pair of slippers. Speaking of returning home, Jeff Weaver does just that tonight, and we'll talk of that next.
Home in Swifton. And we watch every game. And my wife is a fantastic fan. My first wife, we were married 50 years. She died in 1990. And then Carol and I married in 95. And she knew nothing about baseball, but I brought her up here to a few games. And good night. Last night, she wound up down in John McHale's booth looking for John Sr. She wanted to talk to him because she knew his wife. She's been to the Hall of Fame. She knows Johnny Bench and all those people.
There's some similarities between you and I. We're both Tigers. We're both broadcasters.
Right.
And we both enjoyed that very, very much. There's some dissimilarities, though, too. You're in the Hall of Fame. I'm not.
You got a chance.
I've got a ring. You don't.
Right, right.
Would you? How do you look at that? Would you give your Hall of Fame up for the ring, or have you ever played that game with yourself?
No.
I wouldn't give my rings up for the Hall of Fame. I will tell you that.
You wouldn't?
No.
Okay. Well, see, I wanted to play in a World Series worse than anything. In 1950, I had my biggest year ever. I hit 340, drove in 100, had 56 doubles. On the Sunday before the season ended, we were leading the Yankees by 1 game. Wound up losing by 2. Collapsed in the final week. And we already had our plans made. We were going to play the Phillies in the World Series. And Red Roth and I used to talk, and he'd tell me how Robin Roberts was going to pitch. That was the greatest thrill of my life. I was going to play in a World Series. It didn't happen.
Who would you compare yourself to in 1990, in today's game, in the last, say, 10 years? Who is somebody that you look at and say, you know, that was kind of my style of play? Do you see that, or has the game
I have
changed so
seen
much?
some ball players that way that played like I did. I didn't have a lot of power, but I knew how to hit. I knew I could hit 300 every year. The last year I played, I hit 297, which was a big disappointment because I almost broke my ankle. I tripped over first base, and the last week of the season I couldn't play. And I was determined I was going to hit 300. That would have given me 10 out of 14 years in the big leagues at 300. But I see ball players today. I can't name them offhand. Joe Randa here a few years ago, a lot like myself. Joe acted like he knew how to play. And I knew how to play. I learned how to play baseball. From the time I was 7, 8, 10 years old, my father was an amateur player and a good one. And he worked with me, and I just learned how to play baseball.
Who would you compare me to in the 50s or 60s? Is there anybody?
Well, Vic Wirtz. Vic Wirtz was our leader. Vic Wirtz was the guy that drove in the big runs for us. The home run you hit, I got to tell you this now, the home run you hit with the Dodgers, the most dramatic thing I've ever seen in baseball, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it one bit.
Why, because you hate the Dodgers?
No, I didn't hate the Dodgers. I pulled for the American League.
Oh.
And I said, Gibson's coming up to hit. And my wife said, oh, good. Maybe he'll hit a home run. I said, Gibson is so crippled he can't swing the bat. And when you hit the home run, I said, damn. And she went crazy. She said, well, I like him. I'm glad he hit it. I said, he's in the National League, Carolyn. Don't you realize there's a difference between the American and the National League? I really didn't think you would ever get to the plate. I saw you were going to hit. And Eckersley was pitching, and I told her, I said, he won't bat anyway. Eckersley doesn't walk anybody. And he walked the batter in front of him.
Right.
Left-handed batter.
Mike Davis.
Mike Davis, okay. That's the most dramatic thing I've ever seen in baseball. Honest to goodness, after you hit it, I was proud because I knew you and everything. But for the moment, the American League has just lost the first game of the World Series, and really, they never recovered.
Well, George, we appreciate you. We appreciate your time, and we're certainly honored to have you as part of our rich tradition here with the Tigers. And you're always welcome in our booth.
Thank you. I enjoyed that last night. I tell you too, that brought back memories.
You put chills not only down my spine, but a lot of others in Detroit.
I appreciate it.
All right, guys, thank you. George Kell, a former American League batting champion, one of the better hitters in Tiger history. In a moment, George's old broadcasting partner, Ernie Harwell, will recall one of the worst Tiger hitters ever. Never mind that he was a pitcher. Ernie will tell that tale when we continue from Texas in just a moment. That we see at Comerica Park, the Texas Rangers, when the ballpark was built, have honored some of their former players and some of their many fans by having their names immortalized on brick pavers in a walkway outside the ballpark. Speaking of former players, not many Tigers will graduate from baseball and go on to have the kind of business career that Hank Aguirre would have in Detroit. He was a very solid pitcher for the Tigers back in the 1960s. In fact, in 1961, Aguirre led the American League with an ERA of a scant, we're talking scant, 2.21. But as Ernie Harwell tells us, Aguirre will never be known for his bat. He will be known for his lack of one.
And the season rolled on, with the Tigers turning out a new hero each day. A Hollywood finish with enough thrills to last a lifetime. Not so for Tiger Town. The best was yet to come.
Thank you, John. I'm here in the Detroit Historical Museum, and on the Cinco de Mayo, it's very fitting that we pay tribute to the tall Mexican Hank Aguirre, who was probably the worst hitter in baseball, but he did a great job with his Mexican industries after he came out of baseball. I want to show you a bat right here. This is Henry's bat, and you might notice that it's been not marred at all by a ball hitting it. At one point, he had about 2 for 75, and the Detroit baseball writers voted him the most horrible hitter in baseball. Henry was a proud man, though, and he was negotiating with Jim Campbell, the general manager of the Tigers, and he wanted a raise. He didn't get one the first year, and then he told Jim, he said, "I'm a proud guy, I got to have a raise." And Jim said, "All right, I'll raise your salary 1 penny the next year." But Henry was a great guy, and we loved him, and he was a lot of fun for everybody. But as I say, he didn't hit many balls with that bat of his. I remember one time broadcasting a Yankee-Tiger game in Yankee Stadium, and Henry got one of his rare hits. He hit a ball deep into right center field. He raced around first, headed for second, got around second, puffed into third, and stopped there, and got up and brushed himself off. And Tony Cuccinella was the third base coach for the Tigers, and Hank said, "Tony, what do you think about that 3-bagger? Do you think I should steal home now?" And Tony said, "Forget about it, Hank. It took you 20 years to get to third base. We don't want you to get caught now going home." But Henry Aguirre was a great guy. We loved him, and we salute the High Mexican. Now back to you, John.
All right, Ernie, thank you. Nice job as always. So happy Cinco de Mayo to the Aguirre family and the rest of those of Mexican heritage there in Detroit. Cinco de Mayo will truly be quite a party here in Texas and in Anaheim, where the Tigers are spending the weekend. And we've got the games for you between the Angels and the Tigers on Saturday and Sunday before the Tigers make the cross-country journey home, so that the two teams they just saw on the road can visit Detroit. Texas is in Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. The first two of those here on Fox Sports Net. A reminder that Thursday is Autograph Day. Billy McMillan and Steve Sparks set to sign for you from 11 to 11:45 Thursday morning prior to the 105 ball game. And then the Halos visit on the weekend with Fridays and Sundays games on our air. And we'll wrap up the week when we unwrap the next edition of Tigers Weekly next Saturday morning. Until then, I'm John Keating in Arlington. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
In the air, left field, towards the pole.
Oh, isn't that sweet?
Would you take a 3-run home run?
Yeah.